Just drag the couch up.
You guys are so ugly.
Wow. I'm convicted now.
Except for Brian.
Thank you.
Okay, so tonight we're gonna be in Daniel 1, and then we'll be in Daniel 6 for most of it, but turn to 1 first. We're gonna read like 4 verses from there. And I just want to take a look at Daniel's life and see the impact he made for God. Obviously, he was a prophet, and so he made a huge impact. But I'm not going to look at the prophet part of Daniel. I want to look more at the things he did, the way he lived his life, and how he impacted others around him. So just to give a little bit of background to Daniel, I'm sure a lot of us know, but just to give a little refresher, Daniel is set in the time of the Babylonian captivity, which was about 70 years, or was 70 years. His ministry expanded that whole 70 years, and it expanded 4 different kings, and it started with Nebuchadnezzar, and so that's kind of where we'll start. Obviously, I'm just going to summarize the first 4 verses. Jerusalem was besieged by Babylon, and then Nebuchadnezzar took young Jerusalem men, ones that not just any, obviously, ones that were of the king's seed, of the princes, ones who had no blemish and were well favored, so who were smart and they were skilled, and he handpicked those. So we're going to start in verse 5, we're going to go to verse 8, and then I'll talk a little bit, and then we'll go to chapter 6. So in verse 5 it says, "And the king appointed them a daily provision of the king's meat, of the wine which he drank, nourishing them 3 years at the end thereof, they might stand before the king. Now among these were the children of Judah, Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, unto whom the prince of the Enochs gave names, for he gave Daniel the name of Belteshazzar, Hananiah of Shadrach, and Mishael of Meshach, and to Azariah of Abednego." And in verse 8 it says, "But Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with the portion of the king's meat, nor with the wine which he drank. Therefore he requested of the prince of the Enochs that he might not defile himself." So right away in these first 8 verses, especially verse 8, you can see that there's something different about Daniel. I mean, these kids were speculated to be 16 to 17, and they're going to a new place, not his home, and be taken there against his will. He made a stand for God, saying he wouldn't defile himself with the king's meat or with the king's wine. So we can see right away that Daniel had a reverence not for the law of Moses and a love for God. And Daniel is actually, he's one of the few people, well-known characters in the Bible who you won't find anything ever negative said about him in Scripture. Even in Daniel chapter 6, where these princes and presidents were trying to find something wrong with Daniel to blame him for, they could find no fault, so they made up a law to where he couldn't worship God, so they can throw him in the land of lions. So I believe that Daniel had what I like to say, a definite love, or a very clear or precise love for God that really set him apart from others. A love that stood out to others. And so I would like, I want to, how can we have a love like that? Well, one, just spend time with God, have a genuine relationship with him. And one of the most important things is love others. I feel like we get lost in that part of things. I think we do well at reading our Bibles, some of us, and praying. But I think a lot of people get lost at loving others because they see people they don't like or who have wronged them, and they decide, like, no, I'm not going to love them. A good example, there's a lot of examples in the Bible of biblical characters that you could take from that have that kind of love. But for me, at least, looking at biblical characters, I look at them a little different than people I know in life. So one example I can think of that we all know is your grandfather, Ronald. I think we all agree that when you look at him, you listen to him, you look at him talk, you listen to him talk and how he worships and how he interacts with people. He has a different kind of love for God. It's genuine. There's no like mask on it. It's just very, very authentic. And I think that's something we can all strive for. In Daniel's case, obviously he chose not to defile himself with the king's meat. And we'll be in chapter 6 now. And I'm going to read just verse 10 for now. And we'll read more. And obviously what I was saying is they made a law to where he couldn't really pray to God or worship God. Instead it was that statue. And it says, now when Daniel knew that the writing was signed, he went to his house, and his windows being opened in his chamber toward Jerusalem, he kneeled upon his knees 3 times a day and prayed and gave thanks before his God, as he did aforetime. And so when Daniel heard about this, he wasn't scared. He wasn't panicked. Even at the cost of losing his own life in the den of lions, Daniel chose to still pray to God and worship God. And I think Daniel's love for God and his relationship with God led him to have a definitive lifestyle for God. And what I mean by definitive is I mean that his lifestyle was very decisive. There was no, it wasn't wishy-washy. It was very, very, definitive. And we can see throughout the book of Daniel that Daniel lived that lifestyle, and Daniel made an impact on those around him, whether it be the kings or others. He just made a great impact on them. And you can see, in chapter 6, we'll start reading in verse 18. And this is after Daniel was thrown in the den of lions, because the king foolishly signed the decree and he wasn't really thinking. And so it was 18, verse 18, it says, then the king went into his palace and passed the night fasting, neither were there instruments of music brought before him, and sleep went from him. So we'll stop right there. You can tell right away that Daniel had made an impression on the king, and it says in verse 3 that Daniel was preferred above the presidents and princes because of an excellent spirit was in him, and the king thought to set him over the whole realm. So right away, the king realized the mistake he made, and he was worried about Daniel. And then if we keep reading, it says, and the king arose very early in the morning, went in haste unto the den of lions, and when he came to the den, he cried with a lamentable voice unto Daniel, and the king spake and said to Daniel, O Daniel, the servant of the living God, it's thy God whom thou servest continually, able to deliver thee from the lions. Then said Daniel unto the king, O king, live forever. My God hath sent his angel, and hath shut the lions' mouths, and they have not hurt me, for as much before him innocency was found in me, also before thee, O king, have I done no hurt. And verse 23 says, then was the king exceedingly glad for him, and commanded that they should take Daniel up out of the den. So Daniel was taken out of the den, and no manner of hurt was found upon him, because he believed in his God. We'll stop right there, and just right here in those few verses, you can see the impact and impression they made on King Darius. That he was so worried after he had signed the decree, and Daniel prayed to his God, and then he had to throw Daniel in the lion's den, that he couldn't sleep really, he didn't eat, there was no music playing. And he woke up really early to check on Daniel. And obviously, that alone right there tells you a lot about Daniel's, how he lived his life, his personality, how he went about his everyday life. And we're just going to finish the chapter out, and then I'll say a few more things. And in verse 24 it says, and the king commanded, and they brought those men which had accused Daniel, and they cast them into the den of lions. Them, their children, and their wives, and the lions have made mastery of them. Break all their bones in pieces, wherever they came, at the bottom of the den. Then King Darius wrote unto all people, nations, and languages that dwell in all the earth, peace be multiplied unto you. I make a decree that in every dominion of my kingdom men tremble, and fear before the God of Daniel, for he is the living God, and steadfast forever. And the kingdom that which shall not be destroyed, and his dominion shall be even unto the end. He delivereth and rescueth, and he worketh signs and wonders in heaven and earth. And who hath delivered Daniel from the power of the lions, so this Daniel prospered in the reign of Darius, in the reign of Cyrus the Persian. What I'll say is that Daniel's lifestyle, he obviously didn't live that lifestyle to glorify himself. Obviously, when I want to talk about is making an impact, we don't do that to make ourselves so good. You're not going to make an impact. Christ at least. All Daniel's actions glorified God. Again, I said you can't find anything negative about Daniel in Scripture. He's one of the very few. There's Joseph from the Genesis, another character Bible person you can't find anything negative about. But ultimately, Daniel's definite love led him to a definitive lifestyle, which in the end led him to a definite impact for Christ. We don't really know how Daniel died. We don't know. I mean, he's not really mentioned anywhere outside of, again, Matthew 24, where Jesus mentions him briefly. But we can say this, that Daniel lived his life for God, not only because he was a prophet, because obviously he was a prophet, and God gifted him those, but he gifted him those because of how he lived his life, how he loved God, and his lifestyle led to him making that impact. So I just want to challenge us. I'm already to the end. As a group and as individuals, to make an impact for Christ. Not only, I mean, at home, at church, at school, at work, whatever you do, it doesn't matter. Us, we just need to be making an impact for Christ. And this is a very cliche statement, but you know, we don't have forever. We're not promised tomorrow. We're never promised another day. And I know, you know, some people don't like hearing that. It's like, oh, we brush it off, but it's really true. We really don't have another day. We're never promised another day. I know this is the bridge. I know that we're all still pretty young, except for me. I'm 25 and growing old. And I know we kind of just think of ourselves as like young adults, but that shouldn't stop us for making an impact for Christ on this world. So I mean, just don't wait. You know, start now. Daniel was 16 when he was 16, 17 when he was brought to Babylon out of Jerusalem, and at six, could you imagine being 16, taken away from your home and in another country you don't want to be at, and try to get you to do other things, and that didn't stop him from making an impact. So I'll end with this: just love God, live for Him, and just make an impact for Christ on this world. Maybe glorify Him.
Anybody have any comments or anything they want to add to what Eldon did? That was really good, Eldon.
It's good to see, like, you know the story of Daniel since you're a little kid.
Yeah.
You just kind of like to be reminded of someone who really was like
So you could
truly just above reproach.
you can relate with, well, not the
emulate.
smart part, and
It's not unachievable, right?
Yeah.
He's not Jesus.
Yeah,
He's just a man.
it's relatable because he was young, you know.
Mm-hmm. And you're saying he didn't live his life kind of like willy-nilly. Everything was very like, it was very planned. It was
Very
everything he
precise.
did was intentional.
Yeah.
You know, he opened his window and prayed. He purposely.
Despite
Yeah. He didn't just fly by the seat of his pants. He was like, this is what I should do, and then he did.
and God gifted you. I mean, God provided for you.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing to take away from that is like he made those decisions beforehand, before he had any opportunity for, you know, something like that to happen. So he would, you know, like for us, anytime we step out into the world, okay, I'm going to make an impact today, like that type of deal.
Yeah.
That's good. So.
I was thinking of like the end of James 4, and he's writing and he says, don't have this attitude of tomorrow I'm going to do this and
Mhm.
that. It's like your life is like a vapor, it's like a mist.
Yeah.
Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, then I will do this or that. And he's talking about not boasting. And so it's like, it's cliche, but our life is like
Fleeting.
that. Right. And so you have to make a decision of what I'm going to follow. Am I going to follow my own desires and my fleshly wants, or am I going to follow what the Lord ought for me to do?
There's a quote from Martin. It's a little off what Brant said, but it's a quote I've liked since senior year of high school that Martin Luther said. He said, if I knew I would die tomorrow, I would still plant my apple tree. And there's like a lot about that, but really I feel like the core of it is kind of like living your life in such a way that like what matters is how you act today, and like how you respond to a situation. And that's, I actually thought about it mid-message with Daniel.
I mean, like every action you take, every response you have, all that stuff has consequences, whether they're good or bad.
It'll impact the future in some
Mhm.
way.
And it's just faith. It's just faith to just act as faithfully to God's will as you can, and kind of letting God do the rest.
Mhm.
They're noisy in there.
Much
Yeah.
too happy.
Power drive.
Having so much fun.
RKO.
And I don't know if Martin Luther meant to,
Huh?
as this part of it, but, you know, the idea of like, if I knew I was gonna die tomorrow, I'll still plant an apple tree today. It's the idea of my actions can still affect other people.
Mhm.
So if I plant the apple tree today, years from now, somebody else is gonna be able to enjoy the apples that I planted. And so it's that kind of idea, you know, maybe David or Daniel didn't necessarily think about the impact that his life would have on us,
Right.
but clearly it does.
Another thing for that's applicable to us, because I mean, it's very rare for our generation to think about future generations, you know. So like
It's all
our
about
children,
us.
our children, yeah, it's very present minded, even though we're worried about the future all the time. So it's kind of ironic, but something you see, especially like in people, like for example, the beginning of America, they were very focused on, okay, what can we do to improve the lives of the people who are to come? I think that's pretty important. Like when it comes to the Christian walk, like, okay, how can we like bolster the faith of the people who are to come in the future as well? You know, other believers like that. So that's a pretty big thing that we can take away from that.
My thing was just like Daniel, like I don't know. I feel like sometimes when we talk about, oh, you gotta live for the Lord, it's like people are waiting for this Damascus moment where like God
Yeah.
descends down to him and it's like, thou shalt do this for me. And it's like, okay, thanks for your will.
Yes.
But you look at Daniel and his, at least in the beginning, it was just obedience.
Yeah.
And it was just
obedience.
follow the law.
Yeah, there's
You're
no
being
audible
obedient.
voice of God. He sees an
Yeah.
angel once he's in the lion's den, which is
Right.
a little bit of a lesson there
And then
too.
whoever's in
He's
chapter
just-
10 with him, I don't, you know.
But like when he's, you know, the king's being all that, he's just
Follow
he's just being
along.
obedient.
Yeah.
And so you don't have to wait for this audible voice from God because it's probably not
It's
going
not
to
gonna
come.
happen.
You can just, oh, I don't know, check out that thing right
Yeah.
there because it's yelling pretty loud at you, but we often ignore it.
Wise words.
That's a good point. Anybody else need anything? Yeah, I think one of the things that I'm probably going to walk away from what Eldon said tonight that was really good was he said Daniel's definitive love for God led to a definitive lifestyle for God. And it's kind of like the idea of, you know, it actually even reminds you a little bit of what Jesus said the two great commandments are, or to love God and then to love neighbors as yourself. And there's an intentionality that I think Christ used in saying first love God, then you love others, because the love for God then leads to loving others, right? Because you start to reflect the character of God. That's what Daniel was doing in this, right? He was saying, hey, I have a love for God. I'm going to follow what he said, right? I'm going to follow the basics. It kind of like what Brandy was like, you don't necessarily, like there are certain things we try to figure out, oh, like what's the will of God? We actually already know some of the things that are part of the will of God, which is to be good and decent people to others, right? To love others and that kind of thing. I'll never forget when my father-in-law was talking to me and he said, like, listen, like, you don't need to pray to God about if you can sleep with your neighbor's wife or not. Like, you know, like, you think about that, right? Like, oh, like, I'm tempted, like, dear Lord, should I sleep with my neighbor's wife? No, you already know the will of God. Like, it's clear. You don't do that. Why? Because you have a love for God, so therefore you realize there are certain things I shouldn't do because I know it hurts God, it's going to hurt people, right? That's one of them. And so it's exactly what Daniel did. Daniel didn't say, like, let me wait for this. No, he already knew certain things that were right, certain things that were wrong, and he pursued that. And it just led to, again, a pretty awesome story that I actually forgot about how gruesome it gets at the end. Where
Yeah, it does.
my whole family,
Their bones are
I was studying.
Whoa!
I was studying. I was like, I forgot about it.
Yeah, I forgot about that part.
Not just them.
Yikes.
The kids too, and
Children too.
We always forget the Old Testament people in Old Testament times were like, I mean, pretty barbaric.
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Old times, they were-
Achan and his entire family got stoned.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
when
they
they
burn with fire.
Yeah.
I mean, even the Israelites were like, why are you acting the way you're acting? Well, they were like tribal,
Of course, there's
wandering people, you know? I mean,
a reason.
Yeah.
it's just always something to
And
keep
there's
in mind.
parallels too.
Well, you know, Moses was gone for 5 minutes, and they're like, we have to worship a cow.
Yeah. Yeah.
We must worship something, right?
They were
That
tribal
was pretty
people.
good, so
Yeah.
maybe that's why it's like dairy.
Noah?
All right, Eldon.
So you got drunk.
Good job.
Noah?
Yeah.
No?
Again, just
And then this Noah's
again,
son walked in.
quick March 19th is our
No,
outreach.
no.
Let us know.
You know
And
me.
Teresa, maybe, or did you already do it? You did do it.
I already
Okay,
did it.
cool. So she already shared it. And actually, Riley said she's gonna be there. So there you go. So anyway, just keep that in mind. Join that group so that way Teresa knows. Okay, and we have this amount of people. We're good to go. Then April 9th is our escape room. I can't really think of anything else, guys. It was good to see y'all. There's a possibility actually next week. This is one thing I haven't had a chance to explain to you guys. Like the next few weeks are the weeks where like students are like coming and going because it's their spring break. These are going to be like just spur of the moment type of like let's hang out, that kind of thing. So just kind of be on the lookout for that. If you can't do it, that's fine. It's not a big deal. It's just mainly to give some of the guys that are, some of the guys and girls that are coming back something to look forward to. Like for example, I'm already thinking about like next week. Anybody that is back, like we might go see like the new Batman movie. Get together and watch it. Like, figure out.
Let's go.